welcome back. And today we're back onto the PDP-11 and I am really excited about this build because, well, it's a mini computer, it's a PDP-11, it's here, it's mine. Every word I just said is fantastic. But also, I think the PDP-11 is going to be a fantastic comparison against the Centurion. Because yes, they are both mini computers, and while there is about a 5-year difference in build date between the two, it seems like they would be very similar, right? Well, I think they had incredibly different targets. They were trying to target completely different businesses. And so it would be really interesting to see how that difference manifests itself in CPU construction and design, as well as like software and user interface. But we can't get that far because we can't even put power into this yet. And before we even think about putting power into it, we got to figure out what it is we're working with. So we need to pull out both of these chassis, pull all of the cards out and get them clean and take stock of what it is that we have, and then try to figure out how we're going to build our PDP-11 back up from there. Now that seems like a strange thing to say because, well, it's already built up. All we really need to do is just clean it, plug it back in the way it is, turn the power on and go, right? Well, you saw the thumbnail. I made the thumbnail. There's a lot more going on in that thumbnail than could possibly fit in either of these two chassis here. So there's some pretty exciting stuff that has happened over the past 2 weeks. And the story of how we got to all of that stuff in the thumbnail is a fascinating one. Very, very fascinating one. But we're going to tell that story a little later in the episode because I am itching to find out what's hiding out in these two chassis. So first things first, let's pull these out. Let's get the cards out, get them cleaned up, and look at what we're working with from a base standpoint. And then we'll get into the really exciting stuff a little later. So let's get started. We'll start by sliding the BA23 chassis out of the cabinet and just look at the dust in the sunlight. It's kind of beautiful and gross. So we'll set it on the table and start removing panels. I don't know the proper order to dismantle this in, so I'm just going to remove screws until it comes apart. And there goes the top panel covering the drive bay, and look at how dusty it is in there by the cooling fan. Next, let's try and get the power supply unit out by removing all of the retaining screws. Then we'll disconnect the power plugs that go from the PSU to the backplane. And finally, we'll lift the PSU itself straight up, and it's a little fiddly because there's still a connection to a cooling fan. So we'll just unplug that, and boy, that is one gross power supply. This thing desperately needs a clean. Next, we'll get the cover over the card cage off, exposing the cards, and we'll start removing cards. This one was actually already loose and just sitting on the bottom. Then we'll remove the CPU card by using the ejectors, and under that reveals a memory card, and under that memory card reveals another memory card. And then we'll pop out a few more interesting looking cards here. I think one of these is a multiplexer card. And finally, there's just a bunch of these blank looking cards left. And with all of the cards out, we'll get the backplane out, and then we will unscrew the drive breakout board from it. And finally, we will pull off the front panel, which will make the chassis bare and allow us to take it outside and give it a proper wash with the hose. And with as dirty as they were, they look like they're gonna shine up really nice. So while those are drying, we'll use some compressed air to clean off the cards and ultimately clean out the power supply, and that is an explosion of dust. So everything cleaned up really well, just with a little bit of compressed air. I am amazed at how beautiful everything here is looking. And well, this is pretty much every card that we had in the PDP-1183 system. So we have a ton of beautiful cards here to build up our system, but I'm not going to build up this system because I'm going to build something a little more exciting, I think. And well, in the previous episode, there was a very kind viewer that left a comment saying that he had a bunch of PDP-11 stuff. Would I potentially be interested in it? And I said, absolutely. We exchanged a few emails, and Mike He's just a wonderful person, super nice. I took up around 4 or 5 hours of his day just listening to the amazing things that he used to do and still does. He worked in FTIR, which is Fourier Transform Infrared Spectroscopy. And I want to do an entire video talking about what Mike did. So Mike, there's going to be an email coming soon and maybe a couple of phone calls as I try to figure out how to talk about the amazing things that you did. But for this episode, I want to talk about what Mike hooked me up with, because he had this unbelievable collection of stuff. There were CRTs and keyboards. There was just a huge number of Seagate hard drives, 8-inch floppy disk drives, a huge amount of 8-inch floppy disks to go with that, a plethora of documentation, but the real stars of the show are in these boxes right here. I got one big box here, and I got another smaller box over here. These are full of PDP-11 cards, all QBUS. So it all will potentially work with what we've got here. So let's pull every single card out that Mike hooked me up with, take a look at what it is we're working with, make a list of everything that we've got, and then we'll start to brainstorm some ideas about how to build our mega PDP-11 from there. Mike, you absolute legend. It's every time I look down from the camera at the ocean of PCB in front of me, I completely lose my train of thought. I did it again. I looked down at all of the PDP-11 in front of me. I just don't know what to say. Mike, thank you so much. This is unbelievable, and it's going to be put to good use. I absolutely promise you. But, well, from where the camera is, I'm willing to bet that you guys can't really discern what's going on here. But there is some really, really special stuff in here, particularly this row right here. There's some incredibly rare stuff hiding out in that row. So I think what our best bet to do is to just start at the bottom and work our way up and look at each individual PCB, what it does, what chips are on it, and how it can be used in the PDP-11 as a whole, and try to take stock of what it is that we have here. And then maybe we can figure out how to build the ultimate, the greatest PDP-11 in history. This is so exciting. I'm so excited. I don't know what to do with myself. This is awesome. We'll start with the backplanes, and we have two different types here. We've got the H9278 and the H9275. Now the 9278 is, I believe, a QCD backplane, while the 75 is a QQ backplane. Also, you'll notice that the 78 here has 8 slots and the 75 has 9 slots. Now, what's the difference between a QCD and a QQ backplane? Well, this is just referring to the type of bus that is used to connect all of the pins to each other. Q is the Q bus that we're using for all the cards. So on the QQ backplane, this is one Q bus slot, and each slot shares the exact same pinout for both sides. On the QCD backplane, you actually have two different buses coexisting. You've got the Q bus, but then you also have a CD bus. And this is a unique bus that passes totally different signals to the Q bus. And you can't put a Q card in a CD bus or vice versa. It'll actually damage the card. Next up, let's take a look at the M9047 Grant Continuity card, as well as the M9405 and 9404 QBUS extension cards. You can see that the Grant Continuity card is about as simple as it gets. It literally just connects two lines across. As I understand it, these are interrupt lines, and they normally would be connected through whatever card is filling that slot. But if you have an empty slot, you need something to connect those across on the backplane, so that way it can move on to the next card in the chain. Now the two cards next to it are a little more complex, but not that much. And what these two cards do is that they connect the QBUS from one backplane to another. So the cabinet that I got from Pittsburgh had two BA23 chassis in it, which means that it had two backplanes. And the bus needs to be connected between those two backplanes so that the cards on there can talk to each other, essentially act like it's just one really big backplane. These cards are the M3107 8-line asynchronous multiplexer communication cards. We can see that we've got a beautiful ceramic package PGA chip here. I believe it's called a PGA for pin grid array. And then, well, we have two ribbon cable ports up here, and I believe that each one of these is going to supply 4 lines for RS-232 communication. And sure enough, arranged around these two ribbon cable connectors, we have 8 tiny little ICs here. These are UC80343Q, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that these are the UART chips for communication. That is just a guess though. The system that I got from Pittsburgh had 4 of these cards in there, which would give us 32 connections to RS-232 devices. That is a phenomenal amount of simultaneous users, and I'm pretty sure you could expand it to even more. This is an M7555. This is an RQDXE Winchester floppy disk controller card. This can control both a hard drive as well as a floppy drive, and it can control up to 4 maybe if they're daisy chained. At the very least, we can control 1 floppy and 1 hard drive, which means I now have to hunt down the very cool looking DEC floppy drive that fits in a 5 1/4 bay. But we have some, again, very interesting chips on here as well. I don't know what most of these are. Again, we have a huge PGA here for something. Then we have another gorgeous ceramic case here. This is a 21-17311-01. I do recognize that these are probably some EEPROMs. We have 2 different crystal oscillators on here. This one is a 10 megahertz crystal oscillator, and this one is a 15 megahertz crystal oscillator. So probably the 2 different oscillators are for the 2 different types of drives that it's gonna essentially interface with, the Winchester disk drive, hard disk drive, and the floppy disk drive. This is an M7513, and I believe it's very closely related to the M7555 that we just took a look at, because this is an RQDXE extender module. So we've got 3 big ribbon cables on here. One is labeled input, and then we have external and internal. And I think what you do is you plug the input into the drive control card that we just took a look at, and then that allows you to split it out to either an internal drive or an external drive that's going to sit in a different part of the chassis. Now, I believe that what was plugged into the external here was that 50-pin kind of Centronic style connector that was on the back. So this is a very neat card because it allows the use of external drives. And well, like all the cards we've looked at, it's absolutely beautiful, even though it's not that complicated. There's not that many active components on it. Now we're getting into some third-party controller cards here. These are actually Webster-made cards, and these are the SRQD11-B. And these are also Winchester drive controller cards, but as I understand it, they only control 1 drive. I'm gonna jump in right quick from the future here. While I was editing up the video, I realized that I said a lot of incorrect things about this little Webster card. I have since found the manual for this card, and it's filled with a ton of wonderful information. This is indeed a 5 1/4 inch hard drive control card, but it supports up to 2 drives, and most importantly, it supports the ST506 format. And that interface actually is what these Seagate drives right here use. and I got a bunch of these from Mike. Now, what I find most fascinating about this card is that it's got two chips right here. These are AM2901s. These are 4-bit bit slice ALUs. They're the exact same chips that are used on the Centurion for the CPU 6, the CMD card, and the FFC card. And so these AM2901s are going to be controlled by a bunch of microcode. And I believe that that microcode is stored in all of these little AMD ROM chips. This is a lovely card. I got a handful of these. I think I got about 5 of these. So we can definitely control all of these drives. As a matter of fact, getting multiple drives set up on the computer should be no problem at all with these. I'm super excited about these. Moving briefly back into the realm of official deck-built cards, this is an M7546. It is the TK50 controller card. The TK50 is the tape drive that we got. We do have some interesting chips on here. These two right here in the center are AM27128. The sticker over them would lead me to believe that maybe these were EEPROMs of some type. Then we have two Toshiba chips right next to them that are TC5565PL-15. The -15 there makes me want to believe that these are memory chips of some type. Now there is a very interesting chip in a socket up here that I haven't been brave enough to pop open and take a look at. But again, all of this is just for controlling the TK50 tape drive that we have. And now we're back into some more drive control boards that are a bit mysterious to me. Starting from the left here, we have a Sigma Information Systems floppy controller. That's really all I know about it, and I only know that about it because the silk screen tells me what that is. But also, it has some AM2901s on it, and again, these look like ROMs that might be the microcode for the 2901s here, which is very interesting. Right next to it is a Data Systems Design DSD4140, and it is also a floppy controller, I believe. Again, it's using an AM2901 with some ROMs up here for microcode, but what's interesting is that there's only one 2901, so it's only doing 4 bits. I don't know, that's kind of weird. And then finally over here on the end, we have a mystery card. I have no idea who makes it. The only number that I could find on it was PWB110179. It has a very interesting Zilog Z80 non-seg CPU on it. But if all 3 of these are 8-inch floppy controllers, why are all 3 so dramatically different? So there might be some more going on here than I am recognizing. So if anybody out there knows what these are or has found some information on it, leave me a comment below because these are total mysteries to me. And speaking of mysteries, now we're getting into the stuff that is very hard to find documentation for because it's made by Bomem. Bomem is the company that Mike actually worked for, and they built a lot of their own PCBs specifically for the FTIR stuff they were doing. Now this is a DEB1800L. It all looks like it's built out of pretty much 7400 series stuff here. Now I think this is a special interface board for the extremely special fast Fourier transform board that they made specifically for the FTIR stuff they were doing. But the only reason that I think that is because this one has 2 big ribbon cables that board also looks like it has. So Mike, if you're watching, maybe you can send me a message and let me know if I'm on the right track here. Now these 2 boards are the 2 that I am the absolute most excited about for this mega PDP-11 build that we're doing. One of the things that was baffling me when I was going through all of the cards that Mike hooked me up with was that I was expecting everything to go through a serial data terminal. But there was no serial cards like those 8-line Async MUX cards that we saw in the 1183 that I got from Pittsburgh. All of Mike's stuff had none of that. There was no serial whatsoever, and it was driving me crazy until I came across these 2. On the left here we have a Matrox QRGB graphics card. This is a full-on graphics card with graphics capability meant to communicate with a proper monitor. But what makes this card really special is when you pair it with the Bomem DEB1800L over here. This is what they're calling a peripherals interface, and it is supposed to connect up to the QRGB graphics card to essentially give the PDP-11 more graphical capability than probably any PDP-11 out there. And Mike actually hooked me up with the proper Bomem manual for the DEB4100L here. And if we just flip in a few pages here, we can get kind of a features rundown here. So we can see that it has an 80 by 25 alphanumeric display, which means that it has an asynchronous serial line interface, which it says right above it. It's got 3 independent full duplex async serial line interfaces on it. It also has a keyboard interface and a video interface. And the video interface can give us up to 8 colors. And you can also do underline, blink, 8 foreground colors, 8 background colors for each character. And as you can see down here, it says designed to be used with the Matrox QRGB graphic colors graphic controller to provide combined alphanumeric and color graphics display. These two right here turn the PDP-11 into something really special, and I am extremely excited to dig into these. They're just so cool. This Bomem card in particular I think is absolutely amazing. It's like an all-in-one integrated solution to pretty much everything. Absolutely wonderful. I am so excited about these. Next up, memory. This board here on the top left is a M8637. This is the primary memory card that was in the 1183 system. It could be 1 megabytes or 2 megabytes, but there is a large number of little DRAM chips throughout this whole thing with some big controlling chips in the center. Now, an interesting comparison against this is the ClearPoint DMA5400 RAM card over here on the top right. It is absolutely stacked with RAM chips. I mean, just look at that. What a huge collection of memory. I have 0 information on it. I did some Googling around and I couldn't find anything out there. And then below it, we have a much smaller, like a complete opposite of that. Again, it uses the same chips, MCM6256 RAM chips, but only half of them are populated. And this is a dual height board versus the quad height board up here. But this is also a ClearPoint made board. It is a QRAM44B. I got 5 total of these QRAM boards down here, but I only got 1 of these ClearPoint big boys over here, and I ended up with 2 of these out of the 1183. So we have a lot of memory floating around. We just got to figure out how to use it correctly. And then finally, we have the CPU cards. On the left here, this is the CPU card that came out of the 1183 system, and it is an M8190. On the right here, we have the CPU card that came out of, I believe, the 1173 systems that Mike was using. This is an M8192. They both use a KDJ11 processor, but I think there might be some small revision differences between them. This board out of the 1183 has a serial multiplexer port on it, and that's what these ports up here are for. They connect up to a little panel on the back that allows you to change the baud rate to whatever your data terminal is that you're using, and provides MUX port 0. So that's all built into this one quad height CPU card here. The 1173 does not have that at all. So you need a separate serial multiplexer to get serial data out. Now for the 1173 CPU here, it looks like it's got a socket that's unpopulated. I think that's for a floating point unit, maybe, but it's unpopulated, so we don't have that functionality. Now there is some questions about the performance differences between them. Just looking at the crystal oscillator here, this is a 15 megahertz crystal oscillator and this one is an 18 megahertz crystal oscillator. So maybe this later CPU is clocked just a little bit faster. Now I am tempted to prioritize using this CPU because, well, I think it's probably going to be a higher performing one, and it's a quad-height board. It looks awesome. But if anybody out there in the knows, let me know the differences between these two. I'm really curious on the fine details between them. There it is, the motherload of PDP-11 kit. This is insane. This is just CPU and memory. There is so much CPU and memory, it takes up the whole table here. Now, there is one more card that I didn't show you, and that is this card right here. This is a memory card, some kind of DRAM card, but it's not for a PDP-11. It has totally different shape and a totally different card edge connector down here. And I don't know what this goes to. I don't have anything that this can be used in, and I don't know what it goes to, so I can't really figure out who to send it to, but it's a shame for it to be here just sitting in my collection, never getting used, and I'm sure there's somebody out there that is desperately looking for one of these. So if you know what this fits, let me know in the comments below, because I don't have a clue on this one, but I do have a clue on this. This is a ton of PDP-11 CPU and memory. So what am I gonna do with 6 CPUs? That is too many. It honestly is too many. And because I'm really only gonna try and build 2 systems out of all of this. I wanna build a kind of mega, no holds barred, all the bells and whistles PDP-11, and I wanna build a smaller portable, something that I can take to events PDP-11. So on the left side of the table here, we've got 5 CPUs and 5 matching QRAM cards. So I'm gonna keep 1 pair for myself, and I'm gonna build a custom dual height only backplane that has maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 slots in it. So we can do a CPU, a memory card, maybe one of those drive control cards, for a single hard drive, and then we can just throw in a multiplexer card and have ourselves a beautiful little mobile system that we can put next to a data terminal like the ADM3A and take it to events and let people experience a PDP-11. And I think it'll look really great next to a portable Centurion. But that leaves 4 more of these. And I've been talking to some people who are pretty special to me. They've helped out with a lot of things, and I really want to, send them some love. And so I think these are all spoken for, but we have a backplane problem. I only have 4 backplanes, and I'm not even sure how I'm going to use those for the Mega PDP-11 build. Like I said, I want to build this just no holds barred system. So I want to use the 1183 CPU here, and I want to put as much memory as is physically possible to put into that machine, which means we'll probably use these 2 RAM cards here. And then I want to get a ton of storage into that system as well. I want to have a 5 1/4 floppy, the TK50 tape, maybe about 4 5 1/4 full height hard drives, and 2 8-inch floppy drives. Then, well, I'm also gonna go hardcore on the video side of it, because I'm gonna use one of those QRGB cards as well as the DEB41 cards to give us the ultimate graphics capability. And I have a really cool Princeton multi-sync monitor that I'm going to use with that, as well as a Bomem keyboard that I think is going to be fantastic. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to stuff that all into those BA23 chassis, because maybe I want to use the QQ backplane for the second backplane. And that won't fit in one of those BA23 chassis. So we've got some thinking to do there. And well, if I'm not going to use one of those chassis, maybe it's better to turn one of those chassis into a portable PDP-11 and have it be a full quad height thing going on. But then that uses an extra backplane, which means I have fewer backplanes to send out with these. And also I think the dual height custom backplane, you see my problem here. There's so many different ways to wargame and come up with builds out of what we have. We have such an unbelievable collection here. And Mike, I could not thank you enough for this. This is staggering. So if you have an idea of how to build out the ultimate PDP-11 based upon the cards that you've seen today, get in the comments and let me know, because there's so many things that could go right or wrong. There's so many things that could play well or won't play well with each other. So hop in the comments, let me know. There is a full list of all cards in the description below, so check out that list. Let me know what you think the best PDP-11 to build would be based upon what we have here. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.